This will be a more detailed tutorial of how I went from a pixelated image to this pattern in Google Sheets so that I could use this to crochet a granny square blanket. Start with any pixelated image that you want to use. I'm using Canva, so I uploaded this into Canva, and then I'm just going to take this image, copy it, go to another page, and paste it. And the reason I want to do this is that some places up here, it's hard to see exactly how many squares there are. So I'm going to take a copy of this and then crop it. And I'm going to use that yellow square over there. Make sure you don't drag the corners. That will change the proportions. You want the proportion to be the same. You just want to zero in on one of these pixels or squares. And so I'm just going to crop it so I just have that yellow square. So now I can use this yellow square and I can bring it up here and it'll help me count. So this part I wasn't quite sure. I can just kind of bounce along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now I know that this is 8 squares across, and you can do that wherever you need to. Then I opened up a blank Google Doc or a Google Sheet. And if you want your cells to be perfect squares, which you do, then just highlight. I did the columns first, go as far as you think you might need to go. Right click and then choose the option that says resize columns. And then I went with size 22 and just hit enter. And then do the same thing with the rows. Highlight as many as you think you need to. You could also just count so you have the exact number. Right click, resize, and then just pick the same color that you picked for the columns. And now these are all going to be perfect squares. This image over here is 16 squares across and then 26 squares high. So I'm going to highlight. I added some numbers across the bottom to help me because up here these are letters, and I'm adding a column and a row all around so that I have a border. And then I'm just going to fill this in with blue for mine because it was going to be like the sky in the background. And I have to just remember not to touch any of the squares in the borders. So you might want to make those gray in the beginning, just so you know not to accidentally do any pixels in there. Now that I have my border done, I'm going to start down here with this little foot. So it looks like I have 2 squares going across right here for the bottom of his foot, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 going up. And then there's this blank spot right here. So I want to keep that blank, and then I want these two to be black. So I'm just going to fill that in with black. And then because I know I'm going to want to have letters on this later for the code, I'm going to change the font to white so I can actually see it. And then on mine, I use K for black. And then once you have one of those squares, you can just copy it and then paste it. You can do more at once if you want to. And then from there, I kind of just followed along and did one little square at a time until I had the whole thing filled in. I used red for red and so on. Once you have your image filled in, you'll want to count how many of each square you're going to have to crochet, knit, whatever you're doing. And so instead of sitting here and counting them individually, no thank you, I'm going to use a formula. So I put a little table and I just put the names of each color. So next to black, I'm going to hit equals, count if, open parentheses, and then you want to highlight all the cells where your pattern is, comma, space, and then a quotation mark, and I used K for black, so I'll type a K, end quote, end parentheses, and hit enter. So now I know I have 182 black squares. And then you could just copy and paste that, but I'll show you one more time. So it's equals, count if, open parentheses, highlight the cells, comma, I don't know if you need the space, we're going to try it out. So T for tan, close parentheses, hit enter. You don't need the space. And let's say, I don't know why I did tan, that was yellow. So just kidding, we'll put that for tan. So I made a mistake. I wanted this to be yellow. Should be 5, but I'll just go up here to the formula bar and then replace the T with a Y for yellow, hit enter. And now I know that I have 5. And then for red, I'm going to copy and paste. For red, I picked R. I'll change this to R. And then if you notice, I don't have anything on the background, but I know that this is 18 across and then 28 up. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to multiply. So it's going to be 18 times 22. So this pattern has 396 squares. So to get the blue, I'm just going to take this equals that number that I just had, 396, and I'm going to subtract the sum of these numbers up here, and then that'll give me the leftovers. So this one has 60 blue squares. Just kidding. I did 22 and it should have been 28. Always check your work, ladies and gentlemen, and others. So instead of 22, let's put the correct number, which is 28. There we go. So it's actually 168 blue squares. I thought 60 was a bit low. So that's the total. I mean, this will have to have 504 granny squares. So now I want to know, how much yarn do I need? So I did a little extra and I crocheted 4 sample squares, and then I weighed all 4 of them, and it weighed 12 grams total. So each of my granny squares is about 3 grams. So now I'll show you how I found out how much yarn I need. Okay, so I weighed 4 granny squares. I made 4 samples, I weighed them, and I found that it was about 3 grams each. So I weighed all 4, it was 12 divided by that, or divided by 4, and it's about 3 each. So now to get how much yarn I'll need of each color, I'm just going to take equals this cell, which was the weight of 1 square, times, and then pick one of these. So for black, I'm going to need about 546 grams of yarn. And then I actually multiplied this. I added 10%, so I'm just going to take this and then multiply that by 1.1, just in case. And my yarn is about 125 grams per skein, and so I'm going to take this number, divide that by 125. I'll need about 4.8. I'm just going to round that up. You can do this in your head, but I like formulas, so I'm going to use, oh, forgot the equals. I'm going to use equals round up here, and so I know that I'll need to buy 5 of the black yarn, and then you just do the same thing for the rest. If you use the pattern that I just shared in my link tree, one of the tabs down here, this is for Luigi. If you go to where it says yarn calculations, and then everything green is what you'll fill in. So you can fill in the weight of one of your squares, and then this will automatically fill in everything else for you. So if one of your squares weighs, I don't know, 4 grams, everything else will automatically be updated, and it'll tell you exactly how many of each color yarn you need to buy.